Welcome, Rochester, to the Equity Alliance Equity Series. My name is Wafa Al Khalifa, and I work for Destination Medical Center as the Equitable Development Coordinator. I'm here with my colleague, Chow Matala, and she serves the city of Rochester as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director. I welcome you to the November episode of the Equity Series. And just wanted to share with all of you a reminder of where you could um, find our previous episodes. We're building very helpful library of episodes with different tools and best practices around diversity, equity, and inclusion. You will find the playlist on the Destination Medical Center YouTube channel. We would love to know, how are you utilizing previous episodes? Are you using them as a professional development tool for your colleagues in your organization? We would love to know. And we would also love to know if there are any topics or suggestions for future episodes. But for today's episode, it will be about community benefit agreements, which is we're going to hear more from Cara Pugh today. And Cara is the owner of Cara Pugh Consulting and the community benefits agreements as a tool to create consistency in the community, and how can we make a strong commitment to prioritizing the community in our decision making, and how can we shift the power where we can create more pathways for community members to be part of the decision making. In this session, some of the objectives are that participants leave the session knowledgeable of high level of who, what, when, where, and how community benefit agreements, knowing how power is the foundation for securing community benefit agreements, and clear understanding of what you maybe already know, or you would like to know more about community benefit agreements. I have seen in my experience so far how some cities have been utilizing community benefits agreements, and I think it's an awesome tool, and I would love our Rochester community to know more about. Maybe we'll end up having it here in Rochester. So to not continue just chatting here, I want to pass it to our presenter for the November episode, Cara. Welcome, Cara, to the Equity Alliance Equity Series episode.
Thank you so much, Wafa and Chow, for having me here. I'm just so excited because I've had great conversations with both of you all. And so to see this coalition, this community of leaders that are doing this incredible work, it really warms my heart. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my slides, but this is truly meant to be an interactive conversation. I often share that the learning happens in the room with the people in the room. And so I am glad to be here as a facilitator for the knowledge that's already in this room. So again, we're going to talk about community benefits agreements and the opportunity to use it as a tool for equity. So a little bit about myself and my experience with CBAs. I kind of fell into this work. It's a very specific policy tool that found me, and I'm so excited that it did. I have a background in elementary education and community organizing and public policy. And so all of those kind of converged when I started engaging with a fellowship with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the interdisciplinary research leaders, and we focused on the benefits of community benefits agreements for community members, for the developers themselves, for policy focused elected officials. And I've been able to engage in this topic in a few different organizations that are on this slide, and then also utilizing some books that are on this slide that have helped me to really get a strong understanding of what this work is all about and what power building and community engagement is about. And one quote that grounds me for all trainings, anytime I'm talking about CBAs, is this one: don't do for others what they can and should do for themselves. So you heard Wafa at the beginning saying, this is a tool to really amplify community voice. This is a tool to shift power dynamics. So in this space, we're not here to do a policy for others. We're here to do policy with, to learn from one another. And that's why I'm excited to be in this space with such incredible leaders from Rochester. A little bit about myself, what wakes me up every morning is knowing that I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. My grandmother on the left side, Addie Pugh, was an educator and a principal during segregation and integration in Birmingham, Alabama. And she was able to share with me often about the experience she had being a Black woman in the South, and tasked with ensuring that all students have the most incredible education, and how she viewed education as power and what a leader is. And she wrote me a note about what it means to be a leader when I was in elementary school, there on the screen. And her experiences of being tasked with so much and also being often forgotten on the sidelines of policy change, or overlooked or underestimated, that really encouraged me to consistently have my voice heard, but open the spaces for community voice. The people that are actually closest to the problem are also closest to the solutions. And so I do this work every day for her, because I know that if she had had some say and some power in those spaces of policy changes, our education system will look so much different than it does today. And so just maybe in this moment, you can think of an ancestor or a friend, or a colleague who, you know, if their voice was really honored in this space, things would change, right? We're coming off the heels of a really divisive general election season. And I know that we're thinking about our communities and thinking about who's at stake. And again, this is an example of my why. And now I want to hear about your why. What is your organization, your community, your family? What are you all working toward right now? For me, a lot of time was education, equity, or community, like economic equity. Would love to know what you all are working toward and which policy changes keep you up at night, what you're interested in. And I'm going to use that information to guide this session, so that when we think about community benefits agreements, I can give you some examples of how that can impact the very work that you're doing. So in the chat, if you'll share, you know, what are you working toward right now? And thank you, Chow, for saying, yes, utilize the chat for reflections, questions throughout the presentation. And we're gonna have a great Q&A at the end as well. So what are you all working toward? Maybe one or two folks could come off mute, and then the rest of you all, if you would like to share in the chat, that would be great. And another way I sometimes ask this question is, who do you love, right? Who are you concerned about? For me, it was my students as a third grade teacher. It was the elders in East St. Louis when I was organizing. And you may have names of people, you may have a demographic, you may have a general community, but who are you concerned about? And why would a new tool like a CBA be of interest to you? So I'm looking in the chat, and also if anyone wants to unmute. I see information network: build a community where opportunity and responsibility are broadly shared. Thank you. It looks like we've got a principal in this space, a librarian. I see other folks are saying disability rights is a top focus. Children and young adults in Rochester, specifically those that have been underestimated. Another community of focus for you all is helping women, minority, small business get work from the city of Rochester and DMC. Awesome. Thank you all, because it's so important, right? Like I know who I'm holding in my mind in this space, but this is you all space. I really want us to workshop who we need to keep in mind as we think about CBAs.
I don't want to break the vibe here, but could you talk a little bit more about, are we proposing, and you're wonderful, by the way, thank you. The whole CBA, are we proposing one? Are we advancing one, Wafa? Where are we at with that?
Sure.
John Wade,
We're learning about CBAs right now. So I'm
that's
going
what we're
to
learning. Okay.
Yeah, I want you all to have, for me, it's like a tool in your tool belt. And so I want you all to know everything that there is to know about what a CBA is so that you can make that decision of, hey, let's start organizing toward this. Or maybe we don't need this tool just yet, but it's good to know that it exists.
I'll look forward to learning more about it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So for me, what's so important is starting with the why, right? Why would we even take the time? You all are giving an hour of your time. Why would we even take the time to learn about this tool and listen to me talk, right? And so I wanted to start with what grounds you. Why do you need additional tools in your toolbox? Because we know that sometimes the same thing over and over doesn't give us any different results. And so I do view this tool as something new. So keeping in mind what we're working toward and who you all are holding in your mind, I have another question for you. And again, this is our grounding moment. We're going to get to all the specifics of CBAs, but is anyone here power hungry? Anyone here power hungry? I see some smiles.
Is it
Feel
a
free to
good thing
come
to
off
be
mute.
power hungry?
Is it? Is it a good thing? Any reactions? Yes, no, maybe. Feel free to use emojis if you're unsure. I love the emoji that's like this, like, I don't know. Okay, Matt says no. Chow says it depends. There's no right or wrong answer here. This is a good discussion. But we throw that word around a lot, right? Power. Well, we want more community power and we want more power. So we're all voting so that we can get power. We just throw that word around. And if this is a tool to build power, we need to be sure that we actually want power. Are we hungry for power? What are we going to do with the power? I see Wafa asked. Amanda said, I'm hungry for power to be given to those who haven't had it. Okay. So I see a lot of caveats. I'm reading these. I don't see anyone that said, yeah, I'm power hungry. Right? Is anyone in that camp? Okay. And I see.
Maybe it's a hidden motive.
So for folks who maybe gave a caveat, like Amanda, could you share why you said, well, I am hungry for power, but not for me, maybe for someone else? Like, what makes you say that?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I don't know why my camera is not working. Bear with me. Okay, so yes, I believe that power can do amazing things. I think that we should not be afraid of power, and particularly power that's based out of community, because that is really where meaningful change happens. However, I think it's important for those to realize, or those in power to realize, that they have been probably unfairly advantaged in terms of how power has been distributed, and be more willing to give away power where appropriate, especially to those in community who really, I think, deserve it and can use it to the best of a community's advantage to make change.
Thanks, Amanda. And I'm looking in the chat. Did you share what community you're thinking about or what you want to change in Rochester right now? Oh, I see it. Local policies through examining and reimagining local policies through an equity lens by utilizing equitable community engagement models. Okay. Does that take doing all that work? And Amanda can't answer this. Someone else has to answer this. Doing that work or ensuring that there's small businesses and communities of color are thriving and that there's more infrastructure development and upholding workers' rights. Can we do any of that without power? Is there anything I listed that we can do without power? Is
Yeah.
it Al?
The answer is no. You cannot.
The answer is no. Okay, tell me more.
You have to have authority, and you can influence, but ultimately, when things get launched, you need to have some kind of power. And you could talk until your face is blue. If you're not in charge of something, nothing will get done. To achieving power, I'm not power hungry, but I do believe power is essential. Power. And they have to also be balanced by a sense of morality, obviously. And not knowing about the context could be very dangerous.
Thank you. So, and is it pronounced Al?
Yes.
Your name? Okay. So Al and Amanda have just taught this entire concept, right? And we can still have some disagreements because I think the term hungry adds that space where folks are like, I don't want to completely agree with that. And yet I've heard many people say when I've asked this question, like, yes, I'm absolutely power hungry because if I'm not hungry for the power, who else is? Right? As Amanda said, I'm interested in power because I know I'm going to share it. I know that I'm going to use it in a way that builds people up, builds communities up. I'm going to not hoard power. And so we start with this question of power because we have to kind of get to a space where maybe we realize power is neutral. It's the ability to do X, Y, and Z. It's the ability to influence. It's the ability to have authority, but we get to use it in positive ways, power with community, or negative ways, power over, right? And taking power away. But at the end of the day, the Spanish word poder is to be able. And if we are all in this space saying, okay, yes, we believe that we need power, then these tools make sense. If we're unsure about power, then we have to keep working on that foundation, right? So I appreciate the folks who said, maybe not, maybe I'm unsure. And that would really take, honestly, we could talk about power for 2 hours. But I at least wanted us to hear the foundation that power is necessary to do those things that we hold true. And therefore we need power tools. And so that's the foundation and the context for community benefits agreements. There's a great video, and I'll be able to share it with Wafa and Chow, that talks about how the movement of power. And in this video, it's a TED Talk video. They talk about how power is like water, and policy change is the shifts the flow of that power. And so when we think of, yeah, we just need to change policy, that means we need to change how power is flowing. We need to ensure power is flowing to certain people, right? We need to ensure that power is shared, that it's not going in the same direction it's always gone. But we have to be aware of how power moves. We have to be aware of how policies change. And this knowledge building leads us to, okay, so how do we do that, right? If we view power as water and these policy changes are like dams that are being put up and shifting the way that water is flowing, then what are our tools to create that dam? How are we going to create that policy? And a really successful tool that I've seen time and time again and have had the opportunity to research is the community benefits agreement. So this is our power tool, and it's basic, right? It's a hammer. And so many folks have probably seen this tool used around them. I know that there are about 30 CBAs that folks that are like well documented, well researched, but there's hundreds all over the country that I've been able to participate in a research project on, where we're interviewing people that have done CBAs. We're learning about the nuances of just a community benefits agreement versus a community benefits ordinance, and what are the outcomes and the best practices. And we're getting that document ready to be able to share it with communities like yours for folks who are saying, I'm kind of interested in this. So this is definitely like CBAs 101. and want to share what it is. A CBA is a legally binding document or legally binding ordinance. A lot of times folks may think, well, couldn't that be similar to a TIF where there's a community, elected officials who are in negotiation with the developer, and there's, the tax increment financing is the incentive for the developer to do right by the community? Yes, it is similar. I would say the number one difference is that on one end of the agreement, there is a community coalition, or there's a community ordinance that holds that developer accountable. So that's what makes it new. That's what makes the power so interesting, because it is power shared. Elected officials are expected to have power. They have positional status. We vote them in. But are community coalitions always expected to have the same type of power that an elected official has? Not often, right? So whether it's a coalition of people or a document that's an ordinance and it's a real policy change in the city council, this is an opportunity for community to have a really strong say in what's happening in their neighborhoods. And it's a document that says, hey, you're going to benefit from us. You're going to benefit from our neighborhood. You're going to benefit and profit, perhaps. And maybe you're still here to do a really great thing. And we want to hold you accountable to quality jobs, quality green space, affordable housing. The list goes on and on. And it's an opportunity to hold developers accountable. This is another image that helps, show this, that on one side, there's contractors, unions, community representatives, and that could look like faith-based organizations, local nonprofits, elected officials as well. It's almost like everyone you can get. I saw in the chat, we have principals, so educators, librarians. It's as broad as it can be, because you are trying to build that community power on one side, and you're trying to build that community power in a way that it is respected by the public or private institution that's coming to the neighborhood to, build, develop, and benefit from your community. And so I want to take a moment to dream, right? What other benefits could come out of a CBA? So this is the opportunity. If you've heard of this before, if you've read up on any, have you seen anything else that people were able to get for their communities when they did something like this? On the left side, you can see some folks were able to increase workforce training. I've also seen increased like really quality school buildings that were built. They put that into their document, into their policy. Different insurance and health, increased wages, ensuring that small businesses were utilized when they were developing. So has anyone heard of some other benefits, or just dreaming? What other than what I've said, what would you want to see in your community? If there was a CBA, if there was a legally binding document, what could we dream up for Rochester? Feel free to come off mute.
Okay.
Go ahead, Al.
Okay, I'll start. Our community has been talking about, we want to be an America's city for health. That has been our motto, the way we want to brand ourselves. We're doing Destination Medical Center. We have the Mayo Clinic's got the BOLD strategy. A lot of things going on that drive toward this notion about we are a model city for health. And so it'll be really nice, like we can build an agreement to define particularly what that really means and how it. But I do have a different question. I have a question though. If you put together an agreement like this, are you expecting the elected officials to sign on it? And then other leaders? How does that really practically work? Because in the past we have done different plans, and I can name a number of them, and they tend to just I should say be forgotten. Okay, spend a lot of time putting together action plan, but it typically is that the momentum just dissipates.
Yeah,
How
that's
do
a great
is that
question.
different? How do you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I love the dreaming space that you're in as well, of really saying we can re-identify our entire city based on something like this. Um, and as far as the accountability, I have a few slides on that. I think it would really depend on the route that you all go in. If you're gonna do an ordinance versus a coalition that holds the developer accountable. I have a video that'll show what an ordinance looked like in Detroit. They had a really successful CBA ordinance there. It is important. I think elected officials, yes, they can be a part of this. And what's really cool about this is that a lot of time, most of the CBAs are successful without their interaction. So it would be written in as a policy change, or there would be a specific advisory board or coalition that holds this accountable and holds the developers accountable and doesn't let it fade away in the background. But we would have to talk details a little bit to see what would be best for you all and based on a lot of other details. Was there someone else that was going to share
I
what
believe
benefits?
Carrie.
Awesome.
Yeah, this is Carrie Lakuta. I'm from the Arc, Minnesota, and the Region 10 Quality Council. I work with the Region 10 Quality Council in Rochester. And one of the things we've been talking about is not just affordable housing, but affordable and accessible housing. Because sometimes there's housing that's affordable, but it's not accessible. And sometimes there's housing that's accessible, but not affordable. So kind of combining those two things and understanding that what's accessible for one person is not accessible for another. So when you talk about developers, having people at the table that can kind of look through the lens of disability, as like new apartment buildings and things like that are being built, would be fabulous. Because I think that doesn't always happen. Yeah, just to kind of look at accessibility. I mean, there's a lot of things around housing that that is challenging. Accessible apartments are not always on the main floor. I recently had a friend who uses a wheelchair and lives in an apartment building that's considered accessible, but it only has one elevator in it. And the other day it went down. So she was unable to get into her apartment. So just kind of looking at things like that, also at like legislative policy. We've been looking at a statute that talks about prioritizing people with disabilities when it comes to accessible housing units. But it doesn't really have any teeth in it. Like, people can say I prioritized it, but we're looking at, wouldn't it be great if maybe housing, like a housing manager had to do intentional outreach to people with disabilities before renting it to somebody else that doesn't have a disability or need the accessibility. And also, maybe having a waiting period of 30 days, that where they had to do that intentional outreach. I get that people want to, make the money and rent the apartments, but meanwhile, there's a whole waiting list of people that are looking for accessible housing. And then one last thing is just looking at finding a place where where housing managers can list accessible housing units that are open, and where people with disabilities can go to say, I'm looking for one, what's open. And I don't think there's anything like that in Rochester. or Southeast Minnesota for that matter.
Wow. Thank you so much, Carrie. I'm just in awe because I'm like, I love these comments. And I love the dreaming space that you all are in. And I know how difficult it can be to be in a dreaming space when we know there's so much action that needs to be taken. But this is the why. Like this, for me, it's the dreaming space and the opportunities and the hope is what keeps us going. So keep those near and dear, write them down. And I'm going to go through a few more slides to show all the ins and outs of a CBA, again, one-on-one 101. So there may be a lot of questions still at the end, and I would love to talk about that more because, again, to get to those dreams, to get to what is possible, I want us to really know what this tool can do for your community. So this is the example video that I think is really going to help give this some teeth of like, what does this look like in real life? I've been able to interview a few folks in Detroit who were critical to this CBA, who experienced it from beginning, middle to end. And there's a few other examples of CBAs that I have in the slides later. This example shows a community benefits agreements ordinance. So as you're watching, think like who's involved in this, right? And even if it's folks that they're talking about or people that you see being involved, try to take note of how much effort, energy, and people power does it take to do this well. Think about, why was this successful? Was it successful? If so, why? And then any questions that spark for you, we'll talk about at the end, but would love to really focus on those first two of who do you see involved and why does this look like success? All right, I think this is about a 3-minute long video, and I'll go ahead and press play now.
Each year, hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars are used to fund for-profit enterprises here in the city of Detroit.
This has not always worked out for our communities.
The taxpayers of Detroit are paying for 60% of the new hockey arena.
The city handed this land valued at $3 million to Olympia Development for $1.
So in 2013, Detroiters began to negotiate community benefits agreements.
Environmental protection.
Small business participation.
Affordable housing.
So we need council to support community benefits.
In the spring of 2013, residents from the North End Woodward Community Coalition met with City Council member Brenda Jones. In these meetings, residents called for a community benefits ordinance.
The Community Benefits Ordinance will create agreements that can be legally enforced if developers don't keep their promises.
Detroiters conducted hundreds of hours of meetings and consultations with community members, lawyers, business leaders, and city professionals on a local and national level. The goal was to work with council to present voters with the most viable, practical, and vetted ordinance possible. In spring 2014, now City Council President Brenda Jones introduced a community benefits ordinance to City Council. But the ordinance was held up in the Planning and Development Committee for over 2 years. Residents used this time to conduct negotiation trainings all around Detroit to prepare local communities to effectively and legally negotiate with developers around their community's needs.
You would be hard-pressed to find a better, more legitimate example of the kind of democratic participation we need in Detroit right now. The process that Rise Together Detroit led was comprehensive and well organized.
We're block club and association leaders.
We are architects.
We nourish our community.
We empower our neighbors to live sustainably.
We run small businesses and we make important decisions every day.
We keep our community safe.
We're culture creators.
We're lawyers. We know how to fight fairly.
When we have an initiative that we believe in that can strengthen our communities, we campaign for it because we have that right.
In the spring of 2016, with the original ordinance still held up in council, Rise Together Detroit kicked off a petition drive to get the community benefits ordinance on the November ballot. This drive was the culmination of 3 years of research, trainings, and organizing. Detroit residents collected over 5,400 signatures to get the Community Benefits Ordinance initiative on the ballot. But as soon as Detroiters obtained enough signatures, Councilmember Scott Benson introduced a competing Community Benefits Ordinance. Benson's ordinance would not require developers to enter into legally binding agreements with community.
Even though Detroiters collected enough signatures, the Detroit Election Commission still gets to decide whether the People's Community Benefit Agreement Ordinance will get put on the November ballot.
To read more about the Community Benefits Ordinance and to stay informed, visit risetogetherdetroit.com.
All right. So that video hopefully helps kind of show an example of a CBA. And again, that is just Detroit's example. There's cities all across the country with really great examples. I know we are getting close to time, so I want to hear from someone who we haven't heard from yet. Maybe just share, who did you see that was involved? They kind of did like a little bit of a entourage of like, this person's involved, this person's involved. So who did you see that helped make that CBA possible? So someone who hasn't shared yet.
And participants can also use the chat and we will read it out loud too for the recording that's going to be on YouTube.
Wonderful. Yes, elected officials. I know they said lawyers, small business owners. Yes, okay. Khadijah and I are on the same page.
Neighborhood groups. Like, I think that's what impressed me most. What impressed me the most was the breadth of people that were from elected officials to people in the neighborhood and everybody else in between. Like, just really that true bringing together of community.
Yeah, I mean, you may be watching this like, how did they get everyone there, right? Like, I see someone else said families, like Matt said, just people that care, just people that live there. They might not even have a specific title. And so, and there must have been a lot of coordination to get that all started. Yes, and in their situation, it took 3 years, right? Just to get to where they did get. And so it's a lot of coordination, a lot of time, a lot of effort. And the question we get to ask ourselves is it worth it, right? Is that tool, that power tool, worth the work? Is it worth the sharing of power? Because if families had just as much power as the lawyers, had just as much power as the elected officials, right? Then that's a lot of sharing of power that Amanda talked about earlier. So thanks for watching that. Hopefully it helps give a little bit of an example of a CBA. I will definitely share the link to that and a few other resources after with the follow-up email. So if you're like, I'm still not convinced, why would we use this tool? I just want to go through a few slides to say, this is what I've been able to see in my work and what has come up when people say, hey, this is why CBAs work for us. One is what we've already talked about, power sharing, the power possibility or the possibility of this new shared power, that it decentralizes a lot of this decision making and ensures that it's in the hand of families, of lawyers, of small business owners, of everyday community members. It creates faster processes, like we can negotiate and have a community coalition or have organizations at the table to ensure that we get to that end goal, as Al brought up, right? How do you ensure that this doesn't just get left on a desk somewhere? Well, the power of having the community engaged and involved, they won't forget, right? We saw in the Detroit video, they stayed in it for 3 years. No one forgot about it. And again, that generates that public support. Another thing is, again, it builds lasting power, not just around the CBA itself, but also around what it means to organize people, what it means to advocate, to negotiate. People are practicing that muscle, strengthening that muscle of working together. I really like this image on the left that it shows you may have a few organizers, right? As was shared in the chat, again, I think Al said, well, there's a lot of coordination. Yes. And people learn how to do that coordination so that they're bringing in leaders constantly. They're always building people power. They're always sharing power. And so that doesn't go away once you secure a CBA. Then that group on the left here, they're going to go see what's the next thing they want to work toward, right? Like, hey, maybe this time it was around accessible and affordable housing. The next CBA, what if that's about small business owners? The next CBA, what if that's about, right? It continues and continues. So that power, that power muscle that you're learning to strengthen, it only gets stronger with the work. And so that's exciting too, because even the 3 years of work that the Detroiters put in, now today, I think that started in 2013. Now today, 10 years later, they have a dozen successful CBAs in Detroit, all across Detroit. So it took 3 years to get started, but now because they had that ordinance and they also had to figure out the nuances of the two ordinances, but now they have a successful, like they can just have a CBA at any time because they did the work to set that foundation. Accountability, we talked about this a little bit, but again, it's not a document that gets left on a desk because the very people that are impacted, the very people, I think Carrie mentioned, the very person who needs to be able to get to their room and needs that elevator is going to be at the table. So no one's going to forget, right? Like no one's going to allow that to happen because power is being shared. This is people's real life experience. And so there's that accountability consistently. And I think that really helps ensure that the coordination and the energy stays consistent. I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. Another benefit of this tool is the outcomes, and maybe you're already seeing that with Detroit. You know, they put in 3 years of grueling work. It came out just from one stadium, and now they have 12 other CBAs, and I'll send the link of their work as well. It transforms regions economically. There's like local government investment, so people are more likely to say, oh, this city is doing something new. Kind of, I think Al mentioned this, right? Maybe they're going to be the example of a healthy city. Maybe they're going to be an example of what other cities could look like. So investment starts pouring in, and that coalition development lasts forever, lasts as long as folks stay engaged. And again, could have really positive impacts on other campaigns that might not even be CBAs at all. This is another case study around Nashville. I was able to talk to some of the folks there. They were very focused on better jobs, livable wages. They were able to increase their, and this was, I think this was in 2019 that they were able to increase their minimum wage to $15.50. So I'll have to check on the exact year. And again, I'll send this example as well. I think it's a really successful one. They, 20% of all housing units built by this development site, would ensure that there's like affordable bedroom, like 3-bedroom units. Like there was a lot of detail there. But these are all components that they wrote into the CBA. So just to be clear, these things may or may not have happened without the CBA. But with the CBA, it was ensured to happen, and it was ensured to be accounted for. So the community was able to consistently say, remember we wrote this, remember we signed this, this is a legally binding document. So we're holding you accountable to these numbers that we see on the screen. And so this is actually our final slide. You may be thinking, okay, this is a great tool. When can we use it? When is the right time? I have seen that these 5 opportunities are a great time to go ahead and start having a real conversation about how do we do this? How do we build whatever we need to build for a CBA? And again, that would be like the next type of conversation is if you decide, yes, this is what we need, then the next conversation goes into now, how do we start based on the context, the political landscape, and what we need in Rochester. But if you're thinking about, are we a good fit for a CBA? Then, the questions are, well, is there a developer already in the area that's proposing a new project, that has ideas, that's excited about something new? If so, that's a great opportunity to start building up a team of people that can go and start having conversations with that developer and say, we're really excited you're here too. Here's our ideas of what we want to ensure is the case. And right, you all listed a lot of those. You're already an equity alliance doing equity series. You already are building in some ways a coalition of concerned residents, leaders that maybe that's how it's time to start because you're all moving toward that space. It could also look like maybe a developer has already reached out and come in contact with community nonprofits, coalitions, and they want to ensure that they are looking like, the good, well-intentioned developer that they are. And so a lot of times developers will do that for good optics, also for good intentions, but it is always the community's duty to hold them to that standard. So we know that, power respects power. That's an organizing principle. And so you all being organized and powerful ensures the accountability. Even when people have good intentions, things fall through the cracks. And so it is up to community to really ensure that the developers that are reaching out have everything they need to be successful and to share in those benefits. The fourth way is that maybe the government entities or institutions are not acting in the best interest of the community. I know for my work here in St. Louis, Missouri, and East St. Louis, Illinois, there was a lot of concern that especially in East St. Louis, there was a lot of corruption with the elected officials. And so a lot of the folks that were organizing said, we need to do something that's outside of the elected officials. And so that might be a way that it's time to get started. And then finally, there may be a really deep need for a specific community outcome that everyone is organizing around. So in Detroit, we know that it was that stadium the land was like millions of dollars, I think, and they sold it for $1. And folks were worried about what quality jobs are going to come out of this. And so that was the deep need, was quality jobs that got folks to get organized. So with that, you can keep in mind, what you shared earlier that around your community, your organizations, and your why, and think, like, what questions do I still have about CBAs that would help me consider if this was a tool that I want to use? So we're going to jump into discussion, Q&A. I'll be sure to share my information with you all, but would love to use the rest of these minutes together to keep having the great conversation that we started at the beginning.
Here, I have a question. My name is John Wade. I'm president of Rochester Economic Development, and I'm just curious, did the city hire you or did DMC hire you? Is the city entertaining this model? We've spent a lot of time over the last few years developing really a unified development process. The DMC's been involved in, the city was very involved in, our developers. Are you familiar with our model and how we do development? Quite conditioned as it is, it's certainly nothing compared to Detroit or East St. Louis or St. Louis for that matter. Are you aware of how we do business today?
Well, Cara, before you jump into answering the John's question, I will clarify to you, John, from the DMC and city, and my colleague Chow is here also in the chat. The Equity Series is a platform where we get to share best practices that we have seen is successful. worldwide or nationwide, just a space for all of us to build shared DEI language and learn about some tools that we could utilize. Our entities haven't discussed formally that we're interested in having community benefit agreements, although I'll say that our community is ripe for something like this because we see elements of community benefit agreements, maybe connected to TIF, maybe connected to DMC funding, where we're working with developers and we would say, you need to meet targeted business and workforce participation goals, or you need to have prevailing wage or sustainability goals, or community co-design is an equitable engagement tool that we have utilized in the design of projects and in the design of spaces. So we do have some elements of it that's tied to receiving funding support from DMC or TIF from the city, but the opportunities also exist outside of those two support mechanisms for projects. And how can we create an opportunity for prioritizing what benefits the community in every aspect of our work in Rochester? And then I'll pass it to Cara.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm an independent consultant that has focused on community benefits agreements across the country. And so I'll share there's a link that talks about undoing structural racism, promoting community well-being through economic justice, specifically through CBAs. And so if you want to learn a little bit more about how I got into this work, but truly my job for me personally is to share what I've learned. Like I said, I've kind of like fallen into this world of CBAs and recognize that a lot of people don't hold the knowledge of one, being an organizer for CBAs, and then being able to do research around it and share that information. So I was really glad to be able to share that information. And I also have done some consulting and facilitation with Strive Together, so I can share a little bit more about their organization as well. But they do systems change work, and so that's who I've been able to contract with.
And John, thank you for your question. The other thing I will add is certainly this is not something that we have used in the past, but I'll share with a lot of some of the federal funds that we've had to apply for lately. This has been a condition. And so I was able to participate in the writing of the very first CBA this year. Didn't know very much about it, had to learn really quickly in order to submit that application. And I'm seeing them show up more and more in some of the federal funds that we're applying for as a requirement of the grant, right? So I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to share with others who might also find themselves in that situation where they're applying for something or they're thinking about equitable engagement. And here's this tool that they're being asked to utilize that they haven't utilized before. So I wanted to add that portion as well.
Thank you.
Maybe we have a minute for one more question or a comment from anyone here.
Hi, everyone. This is Julie Ruzek. I just want to express so much gratitude to Cara and to this platform for giving us the opportunity to learn. And Cara, I just really want to emphasize what you said earlier about dreaming. I love dreaming big dreams. So thank you for taking us into that space. Just so much gratitude.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for introducing us to Cara. Julie Ruzek was the one who connected us with Cara. Am I hearing someone wants to say something?
Yeah, I guess I have a more practical question about this being a legally binding. So constructing something like that would probably require some kind of legal participation from lawyers and from both sides, right? People that signed the agreement, especially the person being held accountable, can have to go.
Yes, I've been introduced to a few, and then I never knew, again, I'm like sharing information I never knew existed. There are some lawyers that specifically focus on CBAs. So, and I'm happy to share that information with you all, like some of the experts in this, but I would say the lawyers follow the lead of the community, right? Like they know their role is to support with those finite details at the end of the legally binding documentation, but all of the ideas and the energy around this is really held by community leaders, and the lawyers view their role as being a part of the coalition. But that's a great lift, is that, yeah, there's some financial support that's needed to pay for lawyers' time, and some hiring of people that you would trust to support if you go, if that's ideas that are discussed. I also wanted to add to Chow's point around this being in a lot of grants. I've worked with a really fantastic federal grant writer, Teresa Wilkie, who has also introduced me to the Strive Together community. And she's mentioned and asked me to speak about CBAs when she's doing grant writing for federal grants, because CBAs are coming up consistently. And so just wanted to name that, right? Like this may be the first introduction, but I am pretty sure that this is a tool that will be talked about a lot in the future. So I'm just excited to, be at the beginning of you all's journey of considering a tool like this.
Thank you so much, Cara. Thank you so much for your presentation today and for facilitating this really awesome discussion and getting our audience participate in answering your questions and sharing their thoughts and comments. This is definitely an awesome tool, another tool that we add into our library of building educational wealth for our community here, and hopefully we get to see maybe the start of a community benefits agreement here in Rochester. I want to close today's session with just letting everyone know that soon you will see an Eventbrite link for the Equity Series, the December episode. It's not going to be virtual. It will be in person December 11th in the Chateau Theater. With lunch, it will be an extended session. Destination Medical Center and City of Rochester are partnering with Barbershop Talks and Griot Arts, where they will facilitate the discussion, and hopefully we will have some awesome leaders from our community. We're confirming some leaders so they could speak about their pathways and journeys within the organizations they worked at, in terms of how are we creating a more vibrant, just, and equitable Rochester. So when you see my email with the Eventbrite link, please register, and we would love to see you there in person. Also, we will be showing the traveling museum, the Black History Traveling Museum. It will be part of the program there, so people who did not get a chance to see it in the past, as it's been traveling in different sites, it will be there on the same day where we will have our in-person equity series that will be also recorded, and it will be on YouTube. We would love to see you all as we get to gather and talk more about how we are building a vibrant community for everyone who lives in Rochester. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we'll see you next month.